The prelude to the third generation of video games was a time to be alive. Before big names starred in platformers utilising the third dimension, before crisp, clean polygons, heck, before even tank controls, developers were elevating the standards of game quality higher and higher. During this ambitious and courageous transition period into the unknown, while traditional archaic titles still held sway, there emerged a noticeable push towards the adoption of clear, high-definition graphics. This shift in visual presentation not only influenced a generation of young fans, but also enabled developers to push the boundaries of what was previously thought achievable on their funky game consoles. The Sega Genesis, a Mega Drive outside of the US, was one such funky console. Designed during the fabled console wars of the early 90s to compete with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, it obviously sold less despite all of the in-your-face hotshot takes pelted at their rival company, but the games released on that system stood out in the public eye. There are many reasons for this. It sold at a relatively cheaper price, the audio quality was indescribably different, there were various company collaborations, and the sounds you heard were much more out there if you knew where to look. And, of course, it was the home console of our favourite Blue Rat. By the late 90s, Sonic the Hedgehog was positively thriving in engagement and popularity. There was already a pretty banger trilogy, a passionate fanbase, and multiple comic books and cartoons. But for Sega, it's safe to say that this post-Sonic 3, pre-Sonic Adventure era was simultaneously experimental and haphazard. Whether 8-bit or higher, fans worldwide witnessed the Hedgehog's highs and his lows. Knuckles Chaotix was a brilliantly vibrant mixed bag of a game, and the last handheld titles on the Sega Game Gear were all over the place in quality, yet mostly considered good. But there was one Sonic title released on the Mega Drive that stood right in the middle of that balance, for its ambitious pre-rendered 3D sprites, catchy music, and a questionably obtuse choice of gameplay. Sonic 3D Blast, or rather Sonic 3D Flickies Island in Europe and the UK. I just prefer the shortness of the first option. And it is certainly an enigma of a Sonic game. Like, I talked with a friend of mine about it, and they remember their experience with it as that Sonic game where you have to pay money to Knuckles and Tails to talk to them. This game is going to be peculiarly different from the others in the series, alright? Because it was on multiple platforms, either one of them could have been someone's first experience with this eye-popping new world. For me personally, I think I played the PC version first back in my baby days. Wasn't a fan of the gameplay, and I don't think I got very far. I hated the Lava Zone boss in particular, and I think I got more mileage out of using the CD to play the game soundtrack over other games like Sierra's Hunter Hunted. I preferred that over its actual music, and I don't know, it was just very therapeutic prowling through winding mazes to relaxing, lonely themes. I was weird like that. The Mega Drive version was the one I played the most and grew more attached with, so that's the version I'll be showing most of the footage of, though I will regularly be showing the higher definition versions, mainly when comparing the two in music and visuals. Both are good, I'm just letting you peeps know beforehand. I do want to waffle on about Sonic 3D Blast because I kind of overlooked it when skipping ahead to Sonic R. Consider this a late present for you all, heralding a new year of rambling retrospectives. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. Time to get isometric. Fully 3D video games weren't quite a thing in 1995, save for one or two examples. Genre-defining ones like Super Mario 64 didn't exist yet, unless you were to count Bubsy 3D, which I don't. Instead of trying to reach the cutting edge of high-quality 4K graphics like later years, 2D titles would lean more towards a peculiar style to better stand out from the crowd. Whether it's dynamic action comic book influences like in Comix Zone, a mix of hand-drawn styles and the super effects chip like with Yoshi's Island, or simply highly detailed and/or 3D rendered sprite work. And none of these games were quite as competent and awe-inspiring as those by Traveller's Tales. It is a name many of you might be familiar with, and in the early 90s their work looked, played and sounded flawless. A proper bang-up job no matter the game. Even one of their first games, Pugsy, had impressive sprites, music and a physics system with its interactable objects. Their spiffing resume caught Sega's attention, and while series co-creator Yuji Naka and the team were working on a little thing called Nights into Dreams, the Hedgehog's parent company would reach out to Traveller's Tales to develop a new Sonic game using their talent in 3D-esque pixel art. Once again, I must commend co-founder and programmer John Burton too, because them and Sega's collaboration really cooked. Like, as unconventional as the gameplay is compared to the platforming titles, which were mainly 2D side-scrollers, the way the isometric view brings forth a whole different dimension to Sonic's world is quite brilliantly coded. Just look at the scenery. Honestly, Burton's technical wizardry is evidenced just from starting the game up, because not only did him and the team fit a 30 FPS cinematic FMV cutscene on a 16-bit console, but the Sega logo is drawn in with it zooming out and separating, an off-screen voice exclaiming in agony. This was in reference to Western commercials at the time, which had a groovy habit of ending adverts with someone yelling Sega to the camera. I didn't grow up with these commercials, so I just assumed it was added for, variety. First titled Sonic Spin Drift, and then just Sonic Blast, during early development, supposedly like the Game Gear title, the visual design was heavily influenced by the pre-rendered model techniques of Donkey Kong Country, and Sonic Labyrinth and Super Mario 64 were what got them to decide on the isometric camera angle for the whole game. The titular Flickies were brought back, the gameplay loop of you collecting and bringing them to a save point meant to call back to Sega's 1984 game Flicky, just with less cats and lizards. Rendered on Silicon graphics workstations running soft image, I acknowledge that the team didn't have all the resources and time to add more features in the end, such as the planned 2-player split screen that was cancelled due to the already zoomed in perspective not looking so good when it's squished. And during a late stage of development, in mockups it appears that not only was the first stage given different colours to make it look more akin to a beach, but there was also originally going to be a crusty looking crab badnik. It kinda looks like a shell cracker now that I look at it, and this very image puzzled Sonic fans back in the day. I recall it being shared about message boards a lot because, whoa, who dat crab? Also, hey, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see more, kindly leave a like, comment, or hit subscribe to let me know I'm doing alright. If some of you might be interested in seeing more behind the scenes stuff, consider hitting that join button. Anyhow, back to this video, and let's talk about how this baby got released. The Sega Saturn port was quickly scrambled together during a period of only 4 months. This was to make up for the delay and cancellation of the planned 3D-looking specimen that was Sonic X-treme, a game with a similar idea to this one, only seen through a painful fisheye lens. In all honesty, the Saturn version ended up being a surprisingly good port, despite there being clear signs that it was rushed, including the unreasonably long loading screens like whenever you lost a life, and the game not including a save feature, despite the Saturn having the internal and external storage capacity to do so. The game's cover art isn't too bad, though it certainly isn't as charming as other illustrations of the Blue Lad. It's just them touting the at-the-time revolutionary 3D artwork. You could say it's got its charm, but I still feel it's relatively bland, not to mention the blocky background objects under a plain sky. The European cover is not much better, though I appreciate them going the extra mile and showcasing that yes, this boy is 3-dimensional now, courtesy of Me Company, who base it off an actual clay model of the hedgehog as a reference. I always wondered why they made his spines so sticky-outy here. Sorely missing the style of Martin's art right now. Hell, I would have expected Duncan Gutteridge coming back for this one. Satoshi Okano, who would go on to be the character designer of Samba de Amigo, drew the cover art for the Japanese version. His 2D illustrations of these guys just screams hipness, and I recognise his style from that one promotional artwork for Sonic Jam, and this dude is kind of an unsung hero in this series' character artwork. His drawings of Sonic and Eggman and the gang clearly helped inspire Yuji Uekawa when him and Okano redesigned the cast for their upcoming Dreamcast debut, Eggman especially, what with his lankier proportions. Sonic 3D Blast is also notable for not initially releasing in Japan, the Hedgehog's home turf. They wouldn't get it until the Saturn port. But yeah, 1996 was when this game was released on the Mega Drive, the 9th for North America and the 14th for Europe. A port on the Sega Saturn would come out that same year in America, early the next year for Europe, and 3 years later in the East. And in turn, a version of that was released for Windows in September 16th in the US, the 30th for Europe, and 2005 for Australia. So this thing's got a whole new angle, but let's first look at the story they built around it. Gosh, is this really the first time we've seen a Sonic game with intro text? Like an actual in-game cutscene with written dialogue instead of just being confined to the manual booklet? Funny how it took them this long when the likes of Mickey Mouse were consistently doing this 6 years prior. So the general plot is Sonic, along with Tails and Knuckles, flies across the sea to visit Flickie Island, a landmass said to possess loads of precious gems, including the Chaos Emeralds, which are said to be housed here. Bugger me. Between this and Cocoa Island, at this point I'm convinced there are like multiple places for the things. Hell, maybe there's one for each emerald. True to its name, Flickie Island is also home to flocks of colourful, cute little birds. Only these ones are special in that they are actually from another dimension, travelling to the island through these floating rings to gather food. It was also supposedly created when the underwater city of Atlantis rose up from the ocean and settled there, if these mossy ruins are anything to go by, though this may just be the US manual taking a few liberties. The curious nature of the dimension-hopping birds grabs Dr. Robotnik's attention, as the Flickies supposedly know the location of the island's gems, so sometime after the heroes are gone, he unleashes his badniks upon the island, which use the helpless animals as living batteries, as always. The Japanese manual also notes that the good doctor invents a dimension ring generator to exploit the giant rings. How this works, I am also unsure, but when Sonic returns to the island after a short sojourn, he finds that all of the Flickies have deadly animal-like shells which attack him against their will. Though, seeing as they can easily be broken free with a good spin attack, Sonic begins his journey across the different biomes, which we've kind of come to expect at this point. The names of the zones are all alliterations, akin to those in Sonic the Hedgehog CD and later Sonic R. Higher and higher up the mountain he goes. Sonic starts at Green Grove Zone, the usual tropical starter level, Rusty Ruin Zone, ancient ruins formerly submerged, Spring Stadium Zone, a fun house, presumably built by the Eggman, if his decals are anything to go by, Diamond Dust Zone, the slippery slidey ice level with exploding snowmen, blimey. Volcano Valley Zone, an active volcano full of lava that just happens to be next to an ice area, so it's video game logic. Gene Gadget Zone, a genetic research laboratory, and finally Robotnik's fortified factory, Panic Puppet Zone, the name meaning roughly the same as, say, Scrap Brain. Quick side note, but it's pretty creative that Act 2 is set around the scaffolding surrounding a gigantic Robotnik statue, the exit being inside its nostril. I suppose that's one way to show off your 3D rendering. On his way there, Sonic encounters Tails and Knuckles, who can't join him on his adventure, but rather stand around in each explorable area and will tally Sonic's rings to gain entry to the special stages. The Chaos Emeralds are located there, and the friends seem more interested in that than actively helping our hero. Bing, bang, boom, Eggman's fortresses and mechas are eventually destroyed, including the final weapon, rescuing the Flickies, and they all celebrate. Yeah, no supersonic final battle this time, the Hedgehog kind of does it all on his own. The game feels rather disconnected from others in the series, whether due to the different developer, the gameplay, or just the unique, near-whimsical vibes with the story and characters. Also, I understand it's a Mega Drive game, and it would have otherwise been limiting, but I did feel the Flickies and their titular island were rather underutilized. These mystical birds are from another dimension, right? Imagine how cool it would have been if Sonic actually ended up there towards the end. Call it Feathery Folkland Zone or something, with the badniks all running amok and then the final battle being Eggman's final weapon. I don't know. I envision an endgame twist like that would have been memorable enough while tying to the story they were clearly building around the birds. Title screens are fair, nicely done, but very static. Apart from Sonic and the ADHD creatures, everything else sort of blends together in a wash of airbrushed colours. Doesn't help that it's just against a black background with no music to speak of. The Saturn and PC version at least gave it some stiff clouds in the background along with a proper title theme, so props to that. But how about the real question fans had, and to a degree still inquire about? How exactly does this game play? The moment you pick up the controller and maneuver the blue hedgehog around, instantly you'll see that it plays far differently than any other Sonic game. While you can still run, jump, spin attack and spin dash, Sonic 3D Blast demands way more precision regarding simple platforming and defeating enemies with the new isometric viewpoint. With Sonic's slippery movement making even the most basic platform hard to leap onto, everything is just a little more tricky, and the small field of vision certainly does not help things, because while you can run fast like the blue lad always does, it comes with the drawback of not knowing exactly what you'll be bumping into as the screen whizzes past. You can say the 2D platformers were hard enough when it comes to memorising levels and remembering where the hazards are, but add in the third dimension with a fixed camera and you're more likely to run into an untimely death. It makes for quite a shift in difficulty too, though at the very least the game tries to ease you into this gameplay change. For one thing, like in the Game Gear games, whichever direction Sonic faces will have the camera snap forward, letting you briefly see if there's anything ahead. And while you have to be accurate when you spin dash into breakable walls or targets, like in Sonic Labyrinth, you can reposition your trajectory wherever you want. The objective of every stage is not just to reach the end, however. As the lineup of angry robots in the bottom suggests, you need to free the helpless Flickies from badniks to proceed. The freed birds will follow behind you in a line, and you must deposit them at the dimension rings, the more there are adding to your score. This can be a hassle, considering you have to babysit these cute little guys as they follow behind you, and they scatter alongside your rings if you happen to get hurt. Also, make sure that they are safe from obstacles, because these too will make them shriek and scatter to the hills in panic. Oh, bugger me. Come along now, Flickies. They are probably roasted at this point. The birdies also come in several different colours, and their plumage indicates their AI once left to their own devices. Blue ones will always fly towards Sonic, and are the easiest to collect. Pink ones, though they are coloured purple in the game proper, also home in on Sonic's position, moving in wider arcs. Green ones are ditzy buggers and will just fly wherever the heck they please, even if that includes the opposite direction of where their rescuer stands. I've had cases where I totally forgot I didn't pick one of them up and searched the entire zone for it, only to find it hugging a wall somewhere. And there exists red ones, which don't fly so much as hop in the air back and forth. A little trickier to pick up than the others, unless you track their shadow. I suppose as a bonus, there are orangey red ones seen in Volcano Valley Zone, though it seems that's more of a palette limitation than anything, as they look and act like the pink ones. Still cool to picture how these Flickies look. I'm imagining a version of the female Flickies with a fiery badass appearance. Reach the end of the stage with Flickies in tow, and witness Sonic getting abducted by a UFO. Levels consist of different sections separated by gateways, unlocked by bringing all 5 birds in an area to the dimension ring. That's how most acts are structured really, though there are areas that lead you back to the starting areas too, which can be a tad frustrating when you just want to be done already. Screw me for being curious, I suppose. With such a changing gameplay and incorporating a glorified escort mission in just about every level, all this makes for a very, very experimental Sonic game. Throughout this peculiar checkered landscape, there are some things changed and some kept the same. For one thing, there are no star posts, with Dimension Rings and Sonic's friends taking over those roles, but I'll get to them later. Time overs are omitted, meaning you can run around without having to worry about game overs at the 10-minute mark, though you do get bonus points for finishing a level quicker. I wish Sonic CD had this feature. Collectible rings still net you an extra life when you nab 100, there are still 2 acts followed by a boss battle in its own act, and item boxes and springs dot the maps. What's in these flickering TVs are somewhat notable however, while still having either rings, invincibility sparkles, speed up shoes which are more of a hindrance due to the before mentioned screen size, extra lives and blue shields which protect you and your Flickies within undulating blue bubbles. I think it's really cute how they applied that effect to the little birdies too. The other 2 types of barriers are surprisingly useful. You got the red ones, which act and sound like the flame shield from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. While you cannot dash forward when surrounded by a crimson ball, it still lets you navigate through fire hazards without harm. It breaks the game when reaching Volcano Valley, you'll save from practically everything with it. Without it, welcome to hell, Sonic. The gold shield is exclusive to this game, and on its own it doesn't do much, just making you land firmly onto the ground below when you hit the jump button again. But if a badnik happens to be prowling close by, tapping the button again has Sonic zoom directly towards them, instantly wiping them out. Yeah, essentially the gold shield is an early form of the homing attack, which wouldn't be put into use until the true 3D games of Sonic's modern era, though unlike there, you cannot chain combos with multiple enemies. Purple-coloured mines are another frequent sight in some of the zones, which explode into a shower of projectiles launching in intercardinal directions. While startling at first, once you know the safest distance and the angles to approach, you can set them off without getting punctured. Nearly every zone also has some form of cannon-like obstacle which can harm you with whatever comes out of them, whether they are these dustbin-like things that shoot diagonally, freezing gusts of wind which turn you into a hedgehog-sicle that you gotta jump out of, or these nasty things in the final levels that go ham with blue projectiles if you're within range. There are also Sonic medals seen throughout the first half of the game, appearing in the form of Sonic's head hovering above some stray springs, except for that one seen in Act 2 of Volcano Valley. Often out of reach, you need your long line of colourful ducklings to snag them, and collecting 10 of them earns you a continue. I prefer the sound they make in the Mega Drive version than the ports, because how do you go from this from the Genesis games to It's like a Windows 7 browser sound. Despite being a technical marvel for the system, even 3D Blast is not immune to the occasional mishaps, whether during gameplay or just the whole package. For some reason the game is coded so that you can only have a total of 9 lives, any extra lives you pick up after being basically ignored. Platforming is relatively smooth, I never really had that much of a problem with the level design except for everything I've already mentioned, though the sliding platforms in Eggman's base can honestly suck my. These sections take an age to reach past, because most of the time you accidentally go through them after awkwardly having to hug the wall to slow your descent, and Act 2 of Gene Gadget has this unavoidable tunnel at the bottom that sends you to the first segment of the level. I'll say it again, kicking you out of the platforming segments is archaic as balls. There's some odd ways to make the sound literally glitch out, such as if you played one specific song after another in the sound test. Now this is my kind of music. Or one famous example where if you jostled the game cartridge in the Mega Drive, it had a chance of congratulating you and bringing you to the level select screen. This was considered a safety measure over an actual error to get past Sega's crash tests. And oh, don't think I forgot about the special stages. Take it away, Saturn PC soundtrack. Instead of poles that produce warp gates or giant rings hidden away in the walls, entrances to the special zone are locked behind, well, Sonic's good friends Tails and Knuckles, who you will find hidden in each act except the final platforming zone. Bringing the hedgehog up to them has them take away your current ring count. What the heck are you doing with my dosh? But if you give them 50 rings or more, you get whisked away to the special zone, which takes the form of a long road filled with spiked mines and rings. Tails' one resembles high-altitude winding metal bridges atop what I assume to be a running river, and Knuckles' ones being less twisty wooden bridges above scorching lava. Pretty impressive background scrolling for the system, honestly. A shame they couldn't have the rings themselves rotate, though with how many frames there already are for their different sizes, I imagine it would ultimately take up more space than Dr. Robotnik's Pingers! Like in Sonic 2, you have to collect enough rings before the checkpoints, and at the end awaits a Chaos Emerald. For some reason in the Mega Drive version they are all cuboid shaped with a hole in the middle, though that is fixed in the port. After getting all the emeralds, you can still talk to one of Sonic's friends and go through the last special stage course, though the only thing waiting for you there is an extra life. They are also the easiest special stages yet. All you must do is collect the clumps of rings and jump over the spike balls laying on the ground. Collect 150 rings? Way ahead of you, matey. It helps that you basically have 2 attempts per act to try them. Additionally, whenever you exit this pocket dimension, your ring count will be depleted to 0, but every other ring and item box will have respawned for easy recollecting. Tails, where did my shield go? Curiously, each port of Sonic 3D Blast has its own variant of the special stage. On the Sega Saturn, it's very akin to the half-pipe, but now with springs, dash panels, and huge changes to the layout. And Sonic and Friends are fully in 3D, the models ripped right out of Sonic Jam, because reportedly Sega impatiently wanted them utilised while they were waiting for Sonic Jam to finish production. You feel your adrenaline really peak, running along colourful roadways with realistic backgrounds and avoiding mines. They really make use of the 3-dimensional structures. Adding in corkscrews and tunnels is honestly really incredible. I love this polygonal look for Sonic. The only downside for me is the camera angle can often get too crazy to see stuff ahead, but that's just a minor gripe. It's still possible to easily pass through them and nab all the Chaos Emeralds just as you would in the Mega Drive versions. One glaring difference outside of them is how, notably, from here on there is one type of special stage, and since Tails and Knuckles ones were merged, you can only collect 1 Chaos Emerald per act, any other attempt leading to an extra life at the end. So, just FYI. The PC version is kind of a huge downgrade. Thanks to the hardware, you can now see the tunnels stretch far into the distance, though the textures and backgrounds are more bland and unimpressive, and rings are clumped together with spiked balls so often it's hard to tell them apart with how quick the 2D render of Sonic runs through them. I think it's perhaps one of the laziest layouts of a special stage I have yet seen, and I've played Sonic Lost World on the 3DS. For the PC version, they were also originally going to have loading screens with Tails and Knuckles ferrying Sonic there, like how those intros go in the Saturn version, but they were cut. I always end up talking about the gameplay way more than the rest. Regardless, now that I've covered all that, let's go into the pixel art and graphics Sonic 3D Blast went with. Like with the way you play the game, the key aesthetic is notable upon first booting up the thing. While structurally, the level design can be very rigid and windy, the graphics around those layouts are rather spiffing. Everything has an accidental, sort of handmade look to it, the trees and bushes in Green Grove looking like they were crafted out of green clay, swinging spikes in the ruins rotating stiffly through the air, all ones that seem a little too soft and rubbery to be harmful. It's certainly a vibe. Whether muddy volcanoes or high-tech bases, I appreciate the detail and effort the art team put into this Mega Drive game. Even the final boss area looks neat and truly surreal, it being a dark void with platforms made out of purple and blue sparkles. Objects are more detailed than ever, and look at Tails' floofy tails, he looks practically golden. However, in trading the traditional sprite work for a 3D-esque style, not everything looks up to snuff. Sonic's movement is nicely animated, though the rendering of his sprites can be oftentimes jarring. The light reflection on top of his head can make it seem like when he faces forward he's ready to leap out at me. And with his death animation, you can't exactly replicate him rising and falling off of the screen from this isometric angle, so they just have him rise up while making this face and instantly fade to black. I'm not sure how I think about this, it gives me less time to process what got me, and I kinda liked that short pause before respawning. Call me old-fashioned. I like that Dr. Robotnik still has funky attachments to his Eggmobile during boss encounters, even if they once again weren't given names. You're not going to get any X-Mobile or X-Eggman this time. And in this game, he himself is very stiffly animated. The most this dude has in terms of animation is him boogieing it up in his cockpit. No angry soot-covered grimaces here. The checkerboard floor is also not just limited to the Green Hill lookalike. Every zone has these, which certainly changes it up a little and helps give the island more of a visual identity, though I imagine some peeps might get a little tired of seeing it so often, especially considering it's almost always just solid colours with no shading. The 3D looking sprite art I'm not too keen on either. Them being still models makes them look like stiff cardboard cutouts than fully realised characters. And while the main menu is undoubtedly relaxing with its music and the dark vignette surrounding the frame, the awkwardly pointing Sonic strikes me as rather garish. Probably because I saw that alternative off-putting camera angle of the one from the pre-release of the game. Why was this chosen? Conclusively, for the Mega Drive, I like the style of pillow shading in the pixel art, it's just the execution of rendered sprites and animated objects can appear less refined, especially years after the fact. For the Saturn/PC ports, the graphics saw a substantial upgrade in terms of polish, though for the most part they just added more textures and smoothing to the existing sprites. According to Burton, for 8 weeks the Mega Drive and Saturn versions were being developed alongside each other, and they had made this one using the same kind of source code, so the new higher resolution graphics could be easily placed over the original ones. And gosh does the improvement show. Everything has smoother shading and a vastly increased number of colours for badniks and zone details alike. And there are 3D elements added to some background objects, such as rivers and bridges, all while still keeping the original effect for shadows being a pixel apart from one another. The floor panels are different. What were originally flat colours are now all given their own texture, which are different in every level. A shiny dirt floor, squares of chiselled marble, or metallic panels. I also appreciate them adding weather effects too, falling snowflakes in diamond dust zones, splashes of rain for segments of rusty ruin, and a hazy effect for when you're deep in the volcano. It's all very impressive stuff, and I like the new background props added, the giant Flicky statues, steam and electric emitting from Robotnik's doohickeys, whatever this is. And, oh, Mole Men. A world map screen was added when a level is loading to show Sonic's progression, and I know it's a small thing, but I also like the pause menu being themed around each zone with an admittedly unhelpful map of the entire area, or in boss battles, an image of Robotnik holding the pause menu. What you doing with those fingers, mate? The PC version has all of these features intact, only really lacking in some of the immersive 3D features, lacking the fog effect, everything being somewhat more pixelated and slow in frame rate, and adding additional background sounds such as squeaks for the pot mice. However, I do feel some of the charming simplicity of the level's aesthetics were lost with the graphics overhaul. They didn't need to add a flashy repetitive circular texture for the ground in Spring Stadium, and they didn't need to change the background of the final fight to like a factory. It adds too much to what I thought was already a well-executed final clash. Like, in this concept art piece they seem to have more of the right idea. At least the fully 3D special stages were made possible, not to mention the change of music to something more exciting now that they had CD quality. Speaking of which, how about I go into that and the musical differences between both versions. For sound effects specifically, there are a bunch of familiar noises and sound bites, most of which were carried over from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It was an amusing time hearing sound effects from the first Sonic game I played, reused for different situations. Hey Eggman, I didn't know your mech was powered by ghosts. And also, the sound that rings out when you wallop the big bad's cockpit? That's not right, that's the crumbling floor sound effect. Is it not meant to sound like this? I suppose they just really wanted to sell how cracked the glass gets. Yeah. For the Mega Drive version, a bunch of peeps worked on sound and the music, but for this video I'll bring up Jun Sonoe and Tatsuyuki Maeda, coming hot off the trails from Sonic 3. They composed the majority of the OST, the latter mostly becoming sound designer in games afterwards, and the former sticking around as composer and frequent collaborator. Masato Setsumaru deserves a lot of credit too for making the final battle, second boss, and ending songs, which are some of my favourites. I really quite enjoy the soundtrack of Sonic 3D Blast. It's right up there with Sonic 3, Adventure and Heroes for me in terms of best music, and it took notes from the previous title and gave both acts of a zone its own variant of their theme. It's varied, and not all of them really catch my fancy, but no matter the setting, whether I'm exploring through the levels, fighting Eggman's imposing mechs with the new eye-popping graphics, or sailing down straight paths in the special stages, fiddly controls aside, I know my ears are gonna have a good time. It's all very good stuff for the franchise, really getting the most out of the console during the tail end of its lifespan. One of the scrapped tracks left on the cutting room floor would have been the theme of Knuckles' special stages, before it was decided to share the theme between it and Tails' ones. I'll ask you guys if you recognise this song. Omitted due to running out of space on the cartridge, this track would later be reused as the second part of the stage Twinkle Park in Sonic Adventure. Also, I would be remiss if I overlooked another one of the songs originally hailing from Sonic 3D Blast, though you can never hear it in gameplay. Composed by G. Seno and arranged by M. Setz, one of these themes was originally thought to have played in boss battles, and fans who have played Sonic the Hedgehog 4 might be familiar with this one. Yep, it's the one affectionately referred to as the Pingus Circus, repurposed as the main boss theme in Sonic 4 Episode 1 years after the fact. A surprising reuse of a beta theme, though I wish they built off of it and didn't make it loop after 30 seconds because, man, it was unused for a reason. But I guess I'll save that rant for my eventual Sonic 4 video. For the touched-up version, I suppose Sega didn't want it to have the same vibrant soundtrack, or even remixes, either because it would have sounded outdated or, like with Sonic CD, it just wasn't gritty enough. Westernization and all that. This would be the first gig of recurring composer Richard Jock, and yes, I'm aware I flubbed his surname in the previous video. He's a pretty divisive figure. In years since, he had beef with other composers remixing songs without his involvement, and I know he was pretty creepy towards the people who composed Silver's theme, and I'll admit that put a bit of a damper on his achievements after growing up with his music. Nonetheless, I'll try not to let that affect my opinion on his stuff in the Saturn port, because yes, this dude's sole responsibility was to replace the entire soundtrack with original tunes. Your ears are gonna be jamming to a lot of CD quality tracks this time around, and since I picked it up as a young'un, I think I always preferred the Mega Drive originals when playing Sonic 3D Blast. These replacements are certainly more atmospheric and grandiose, a perfect song to Sonic's solo journey through the treacherous, trap-filled terrain as you scoop up lost Flicky friends, and I stress there are some really good bangers towards the end of the game, but some are just straight up downgrades of the original. Spring Stadium Act 2, I'm looking at you. Regardless, the soundtrack has its hits and misses, but there's a style here for everyone, really. Jock would also remix the music featured in Green Grove for another Sega game, Metropolis Street Racer, into the song It Doesn't Really Matter, sung by TJ Davis, though I personally didn't hear that many similarities. Both boss themes had been replaced with just one, and the composer seems to have subliminally taken a couple of cues from Robotnik's fights in the US version of Sonic CD. A lot of ominous organ keys, bell tolls, and repeated samples of evil laughter. It's not too bad, and I quite enjoy the beat. Really makes it sound like their last stand at every confrontation. The final boss music? Well, it's a bit of a letdown. It's just a more sinister and climactic version of the regular boss theme. I don't hate it, but compared to the atmospheric feel the original had with both the music and presentation, it just doesn't sound as fitting. At least the credits theme, You Are My Hero, is breezy and chill, sung by Debbie Morris. Its leitmotif is heard all throughout the game's levels, which can be really distracting when you notice it, though it is most recognisable on the title screen, being the first proper tune that greets you. They brought back this song for Sonic Generations too. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Since the Genesis and Saturn versions both have vastly different soundtracks, this game tends to suffer the same argument as Sonic CD over which of them has the better one. Both teams displayed exceptional talent, even if the general atmosphere of both versions strikingly contrast with one another. The biggest comparison I can think of for this phenomenon is Donkey Kong Country 3, or if you want a more recent example, Unproductive Fun Times Off. Both games had different composers when it came to being re-released and ported on modern consoles. Mind you, it was for different reasons, but it leaves fans both excited for new tracks played over their favourite game, while also being conflicting because you now have essentially two different versions of the game to digest. Like my thoughts on Sonic CD's regional differences, I think there's a fair bit to enjoy in either version of Sonic 3D Blast. There's enough here to inspire anyone's imagination. Well, I think the only gameplay thing to talk about now is the enemy roster. Badniks this time around look more slick and organic in their semi-3D debut, even looking a little more monstrous due to their angry eyes and bulging eyelids, with an added hint of nightmare fuel due to how they were rendered at this angle. Sometimes they look bloody incomprehensible, like what summons this creature? A lot of them tend to use the same 3 or 4 tactics, so despite this game having more of an importance to destroying all the Badniks, there isn't much variety in their attack patterns, or if they even detect your presence. Then again, I'm thankful they weren't tough as nails enemies like the Buzz Bombers or fricking Slicers. So you guys ready for the bestiary entries I write up every video? Skip to this timestamp if you like, I won't mind. I will say, these guys don't have official names, none of the wikis or even the encyclopedia refer to them as anything creative, though Burton did say that they had simplistic animal names in the game's code, so I suppose I'll go with those. Scouters are wasp badniks which buzz about, chasing Sonic with its twin floating spike plates if approached. Hunter is the name of these cone-shaped robots which stand on the spot, protected by a spike ball. It rotates them around slowly, so you gotta avoid that while bopping them, and only blue flickies are found in them. Snakes, despite the name, are a variant of the caterpillar which constantly hop out between 2 holes. Only their head can be struck because their other segments are spiked. Kind of reminds me of the sandworms from Sonic and Knuckles. Oh cripes, it's a robotic Charmy Bee! Like many other enemies seen in the game, they simply stay in one designated area and fly about like they're high on caffeine. The Croc. Man, what with Vector being associated with Charmy, I wonder if this was a coincidence. They have sharp teeth, but seem more interested in waddling back and forth. Dragfly is the name of pink robots which buzz about on the spot, not possessing any other means of defense. Fishes are essentially pufferfish which float back and forth in the air, extending and deflating their bodies to produce spikes. In Gene Gadget Zone, they tend to hover over electric flooring. Spiders are like the Crocs in that all they do is wander back and forth. You'd think Sonic has to do a spin attack because they have spikes on their backs, but they are entirely cosmetic and can be jumped on. Shells are, you know what, I don't even know. Crabs, clams, either way, they will chase you if you approach them. Pengo is a robot which simply marches back and forth, possessing no other means of attack. Coincidentally share the name of a Sega arcade game. Oh bugger, snowmen are actually the most dangerous enemies in the game. Sometimes seen around slippery areas with bumpers, they slide in a straight line, stopping to fire a wave of snowballs before retreating again. The Flicky inside them is always frozen afterwards. Poor guy. Bunnies are rabbit robots which hop on pogo sticks, emitting funny noises with every bounce. They don't do much else, though I wonder if their colour scheme was influenced by Sat.AM's Bunny Rabbit. The mines in Diamond Dust Zone aren't classified as badniks, but they are certainly robot-shaped and can be struck with the homing attack like any other enemy. They explode into snowballs the moment you stand too close to them. Fireflies, do nothing but buzz on the spot and glare at you. You'd think they put their stinger to use. Bats are rather goofy, having gag noses and fangs, and only really floating forward and back. Bugs are insectoid things that look like they belong in a different game. They have spikes on their backs, but you can still jump on them unharmed. Scorpy is the name of a scorpion badnik, which has a stinger it forgot to use. Pop them open however you like. Mice are legless machines which seek you out if you're close, otherwise just moving about dizzily, often seen in close approximation to spinning cannons. The octopus is more like an immobile turret. They stay on the spot, turning their head towards you and can fire blue projectiles in all 8 directions. These last ones are more like obstacles, since they do not have flickies inside and are thus not required to be destroyed to continue. Whorls just float about on the spot. And lastly, walkers, these weapons with legs that walk back and forth in set areas, constantly firing projectiles out of 4 different cannons. Alright, so that's everything this game has to offer. I suppose it's high time I talk about what Pete's thought of Sonic 3D Blast and its influences following the game's release. Due to it having a completely different style of gameplay, critics were positively baffled by the existence of Sonic 3D Blast back in the day, and who could blame them? Not only was it not a proper 3D game, it had a wonky isometric aesthetic and a slower pace in terms of level progression. They also weren't too fond of the fetch quest mechanic involving the Flickies. It was all such a departure from the dynamic 2D platforming built around quick reflexes. The music and graphics were praised to hell and back at least. In the eyes of fans new and old, I'd say opinions were split right down the middle. On one hand, there were those that found it a slog to get through, with a repetitive gameplay loop of destroying robots, ferrying birds to the giant rings, rinse and repeat with slippery-ass controls, and on the other, there are those that grew up with this curiously experimental game which, while different, truly pushed the system past the limit in its graphics, and is a nice break from the usual style that could be easily mastered for speedruns. I know fans today still cherish the soundtrack, more towards the Mega Drive one than the Saturn release, and both have seen their fair share of remixes, both by fans and in future Sonic games, and no, I don't just mean the Pingus music. Sega were cool enough with the finished project to port it in compilations, or bundle it within multi-packs, and of course, Sonic Mega Collection. I recall playing it often after school. It additionally saw a release on other platforms too, from the Wii's Virtual Console to Steam. It may not be a part of Sonic Origins, despite using the titular island as a background for one of the menus, but it is still readily available for fans and retro game enjoyers to check out. There were also several comic book adaptations back in the day. Hey, this was the hot new Sonic game, they simply had to borrow its setting. Archie Comics released theirs first, a 48-page one-shot just called Sonic Blast, no relation to the Game Gear title of the same name. It had a couple of different stories, but first and foremost was the one based on this game. Dr. Robotnik accidentally makes an announcement about his plans involving the fabled Flickie Island, with an IE at the end, and he wants to steal all of its gems and delights. After some shenanigans, Sonic, Tails, and Rotor proceed to go to the island on their submarines, mowing down roboticized Flickies, taking on Dr. Robotnik himself with his Doctor Strange cloak. I'm beyond certain that is a reference, writer Mike Gallagher is a huge Marvel Comics fan. Eventually resulting in a final battle in the second zone against the Techno Body Shell Battlesuit, a simpler yet sturdy form of the final weapon mech. Antics ensue, the heroes make it out. I hate that hedgehog. A classic, non-serious Archie Comics story. Egmont Fleetway would adapt the game in issues 104 through 106. Since Sonic the Comic stories were only a couple pages long, they did have to share page space with other stories and Sega comics. A hint of the game's narrative was squeezed to fit into what is essentially a few scenes. Following Robotnik's latest defeat in the Sonic 3 adaptation, the Emerald Hill folk are rescued, and Knuckles' island is back in flight. Sonic finds himself bored out of his mind with nothing to do, until a random Flickie comes by asking for help. Looks like the big bad is scheming on Flickie's Island, turning the birds into badniks, and golly are they menacing in this version. As corny as the writing can be, they truly went above and beyond, making Robotnik a legitimate threat throughout Sonic the Comic. It's not until a prosecutor of the Draken Empire rears his ugly head that Dr. Robotnik's plan is foiled. Technically the Drakens also first appeared here, a galactic empire of fish people in heavy suits of armour. They created the Chaos Emeralds in this universe. But yeah, Robotnik is taken away, and that's where the Sonic 3D Blast homage ends. The location wouldn't make another book appearance until IDW's Tails one-shot, which served as a spiritual sequel to Tails Sky Patrol. I've brought it up in a previous video, but IDW Publishing had a story where Sonic and Tails returned there, only to find previous bad guys, Witchcart and her gang, had taken over. I had really enjoyed how much the artists captured the feel of the game, from the checkerboard aesthetic and badniks, to the locations all ripped straight out of 3D Blast. It's also neat how Witchcart had built her face over Robotnik's giant statue in Panic Puppet Zone. For ROM hacks, there are a surprisingly decent amount, though they are mostly slight alterations. You got those that are hot fixes, ones to add Supersonic as a feature, one of which removes the Flickies, which honestly I think is surprisingly fun because you can just breeze through the game without having to stop and think. I am fairly certain the Sonic Blast Next demo was inspired by this game's semi-3D look, a fan retelling of the first stage of Sonic Blast for the Game Gear. I actually overlooked this game until finishing my original video, despite incorporating music from it, but I can say it plays and looks really well, and clearly has a lot of talent behind it. I hope its creator can build up a team to make more levels in this style. Perhaps they can design a blue marine zone that is actually playable.
Hey, I doubt it!
One of my old faves based on this title is Sonic 3D in 2D, a fan game arranged like the more popular style for the Hedgehog, created by Sotanuk. Made to bridge the gap between Sonic 3 and Sonic Adventure, and released in 2020, you play as either Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles as you traverse a hard mode version of familiar zones, subtly reusing assets from the Mega Drive and GBA games. The Flickies and enemies have reverted back to their normal roles, Dr. Robotnik has his more modern style of clothing, there's sodding underwater segments in zones now. And what's this? Sub-bosses at the end of Act 1? How nice. Oh god, the Tails doll has a metal skeleton. Badniks do more than just basic movement, although I don't appreciate how often they are placed in the maps. It makes this game really hard to be fast in. Special stages emulate the Sonic 2 design with blurringly quick rings and mines, and you reach them from giant rings once again. And I shan't spoil any more of the game or its unlockables, but it's a pretty impressive project, let me tell you. If you like Sonic 3 and don't mind a challenging spike in difficulty, you'll most likely enjoy this fan game. Hey, it's Fang the Sniper! I know White Feather Projects had a proof of concept a little while ago of a Sonic 3D Blast remake. Looking forward to how that might go if it's still being worked on. Bulbasaur. And of course, John Burton himself released his own unofficial director's cut version. Since the original release on the Mega Drive, there's a lot of new features added, both big and small, from a time attack mode, an overworld map screen, a password save feature, a level editor, changes to colour palettes, Flicky AI and enemy hitboxes, and the odd bug fix. Sonic's acceleration was somewhat increased as if he always has speed boots on. I noticed it most when he overshot his target in this part, which can make jumping on small platforms trickier and making that one lava boss all the more harder. They added a radar for off-screen Flickies so that they don't get lost among the scenery. A welcomed addition. Even the crab makes an appearance. Yay for crab. And the biggest update is, well, there's a bigger reason to collect the Chaos Emeralds, because once you leave the special stage and collect 50 rings... Yep, the Mad Lad patched in Super Sonic. It only took over a decade and is evidently just a recoloured regular Sonic. But he's finally here, though mind you, you can only collect one Chaos Emerald per zone. Yeah, you heard me right, not act, zone, which means Tails and Knuckles were added into the last levels to compensate for this. You can't pit Super Sonic against the final weapon, sadly. Regardless, these fixes do change a lot of the gameplay, for better or for worse, but it's there if you want to revisit the game with a new, somewhat refined touch of paint, so to speak. This homebrew thing may not have been developed by Sega directly, but the Sonic the Hedgehog Encyclopedia did openly acknowledge it. You did good, Burton. I hope you continue to show your skills in Traveller's Tales LEGO game adaptations. In the wake of its release, Sonic 3D Blast is often left on the wayside, and its gameplay is certainly less player-friendly than the more traditional platformers of its generation. The gameplay loop is repetitive, and boss battles can be frustrating when you've already got their abilities memorized, and the isometric view and the camera can be unorthodox, even janky at times. But it's not a terrible game in my eyes. I'll never forget first experiencing its style and its wonderful soundtrack which graced the series, and I'm referring to both versions in that compliment. They were a nice reminder of the experimental era of gaming when properties first attentively dipped their toes in the third dimension. Though with how finicky it is, I would only suggest this for fans of classic Sonic who want to try something other than a 2D side-scroller, and form your own opinions. As a swan song for Sonic on the 16-bit system that birthed him, Sonic 3D Blast could have been better, but it also could have been a lot worse. For the list, I'll have to give it an average score of C, just above average, because I did generally have fun playing it, multiple times, even for the other versions. Am I crazy? I'm in the fandom, we're all a little crazy. Thank you ever so much for watching, if indeed you still are, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hedgehog's right outside my window! SSSSS squad! Arrest SSSS him! Get your gears in gear, slowpoke!